Good morning, breakfast people, and welcome to We Eat Stories for Breakfast. I'm
Yum.
Adam Jeffrey Rossi.
I'm Chandler Bramstead.
So, if you are one of the people who really wanted video for our podcast and you're watching this on YouTube, then we
You're gonna
can't
be
really get away with hiding what's happening right
you're
here.
you're gonna be curious. Well, you won't. You'll be curious now, but all will be revealed in time. Just wait 2 weeks, and you will know exactly
You'll be
when we recorded this.
you'll be very confused, but we're not going to
Also,
explain.
but I will explain one thing: is that I am at a different camera angle than you guys are used to. I have moved my desk into my closet. Don't ask me why. But so different. You can see my door with all my jackets and stuff. Don't
I'm in a
don't make fun of
different
it.
shirt and I'm in a different chair, so.
That does look like a nice chair.
But we have an important order of business to do, and that's to rank Nika's very unique breakfast.
I would argue it's not terribly unique at its core, but when you get into the specifics for us, it is it is unique to us.
It is very unique to us. I'm going to kick it off right off the
Oh,
bat. I'm going. Oh wait, so actually we should first explain, remind people what it was. So it is Persian flatbread with preservative of your choice. Now she mentioned apricot or fig, so I did get fig
as
preservative
did I.
with feta cheese. Uh, I couldn't find it anywhere, but my roommate is an incredible baker, so she baked it for me. Right off the bat, I love this. It was exactly something that I would never try, and I mentioned that on the episode with Nika, and it was awesome. And I said, "You're gonna have to make this more often because this is something I'm gonna want to have for breakfast now." I'm going 9 out of 10. It was
Oh,
yeah, I
unexpected.
I loved it. Again, it was such an interesting combination of the sweet and the savory, like she was talking about with the with the preservative and the feta together. I thought about trying it another time and maybe putting like a little honey on top, or even just like trying it with different preservatives. But it was delicious. I loved it.
I will say I did initially give one ranking, and I did have to amend it. I need to amend what my initial ranking
Okay.
was, and I will
Okay.
explain why. So
Okay.
same thing. I know I live a lot closer to Nika. I could have gone and found the market where she gets her bread, and I could have gotten the same bread, but I didn't want to bother her, and I couldn't figure out where the hell she got her bread. So I also made the bread myself. First of all, just the process of making the bread was so satisfying and fulfilling. I will keep making the bread because it was fun to make. Also, the bread ended up being very good, and also did fig jam. My initial ranking, I had initially given it an 8 out of 10 because it was fantastic. It was something I would have never thought to have before. It made me realize that I knew what fig tasted like because I've had fig Newtons, but I never really knew what fig Newton was. But now I
Yeah.
know what fig Newton is. But I think when I initially had it, I was like, this is good. It's kind of just like jam and toast. It's missing some kind of protein. And then because I made the bread myself and it came in, the recipe was for 2 loaves and I had 2 loaves of bread. I
Yeah.
was like, I guess I'll make it again the next day. And I'll make it again the next day. And I made it again the next day. And so realizing that I had some preconceptions about what breakfast should be, but this ended up being like for like a solid week and a half to 2 weeks, this was my go-to breakfast.
Yeah.
I still think that it would be best with a protein because I think a protein is good for your day. So I would also amend it to be a 9 out of 10.
Wondering, first of all, very fun. It's our first match on the rankings. That's fun. Um, I'm wondering what protein it would be though, because in my head, I'm like
Yeah.
afraid of that. Like it doesn't sound like to me in my head that it would be something that's great.
Well, I don't think you would put protein on it. Like I think it would be kind of like if you were gonna have a breakfast of multiple things, and that's where I'm kind of like, if it was a bigger deal, I'd have kept it at an 8 or been a 7 if it needed a protein. But I mean, you're right. What would you pair that with?
I
Because
mean, it
you
was
like,
that's why I rated it a 9 because it was exactly what I wanted. There was nothing outside of like just a curiosity of trying it with different things. Like I mentioned, there was nothing about it that I was like, I want this to be different. The only reason that it was a 9 out of 10 is that like I don't think it's something that I'll be like I have all the time, but it's absolutely something that I'll be like, man, you know what I want for breakfast today? I
I
just
want
want
that.
that. Like it just was so really good, and you nailed it when you said Nika, you have successfully navigated the only way that you can to get around B's and G's is something that's unique to you and your family and the culture you grew up in, and it was great. I loved
And it
it.
was fantastic. I will also say, so going shopping for the stuff I needed for this, and because I live in a household with my fiance, we also got another jam in case she's not a big fig person. So we got a blackberry, and we knew there was going to be a lot of bread. So we also got a blackberry jam with it.
Ooh,
I
that sounds
think
good.
the fig was very good. The blackberry was a lot sweeter, but
Ooh,
also
okay.
I am a sucker for blackberry jam.
I love
So
blackberry jam.
if
Yeah,
you want
that
it,
that
if you want
was
it with a twist,
that was one of the other things that I said is that next time my roommate Cassidy makes it, I'm gonna be like, let's get a different preservative and try it with that, because she tried it with me too, and we both were like, this is awesome. So,
yeah, and
also I
Juliana
will say,
loved it.
shout out to feta cheese, something that like in my young adult life I never ever had, and now I love it on so many things like Greek salads or Greek fries, or I love it in tomato soup. Tomato with feta is
Oh,
so good. Like I have it in so many things these days, and now I'm gonna have it with a breakfast dish.
yeah, it's incredible. I didn't know that I had ever had feta, and then I got feta, and then I realized I've had gyros before, but I've never really been able to identify it. So I didn't know that I liked feta until this dish, and I'm like, oh, I love
Listen,
feta.
I have it a lot, but I'm still not fed up with it yet, so I'm gonna keep using it. Uh,
I'm leaving.
anyway, let's talk about some stories we've been digesting recently. We and I have talked a lot about our love for role-playing games.
That's how we
Uh,
met.
that's how we met. That's how we know each other. Um, and we are both DMs. And since our last episode, I had my first moment of killing a player character, and it happened, I think, because it was just this intense moment of sincerity between me, the player, and the story. And it was this really interesting thing where the person that they were fighting is the brother to one of the party members, and he was trying to take her because he needs her for outside reasons. I don't want to explain because if my
If
party's
they
listening to
listen,
this
yeah.
episode, I want to give away spoilers of how it's all connected. But he had this moment where he froze time between him and another character who was near one of the party members, and he said, "Let me leave with my sister, and I will leave, and I will not hurt any of you. If you don't, I will kill this person right here," because it was a person who had gone down and they had already failed a death save. So if they got hit with an auto crit, lose two death saves, they're dead. And the character in that moment said, "Listen, I have a sibling too, and I like to think that she wouldn't just give up on somebody like that." And so he was like, okay. And we snapped back into it. And I said, okay, he plunges the nut dagger into your heart. What are the last thoughts that you have as your last bit of life falls away? And he said, I look up to my party, and my last thought is about family. And then my eyes close. And I was like, and that's where we end session. And it was just this really, really crazy moment of like all of us being willing to let the story go to a somewhat dark and intense emotional place because it was in service of a very good story. Now, spoiler alert, he ended up being revived, so he's not like dead, but it was still my first moment of truly killing a player, and
Yeah,
like they were so distraught over it. And the next session we had after that was like so weird and charged because they were like emotionally exhausted from this moment of like, wait, we're not invincible. What are we doing here? Like it was just really cool, and I love I love the ability of role playing games to give you those moments of sincerity and honesty.
absolutely. That's you don't get many character deaths nowadays. I feel like I don't know.
Especially the way that D&D 5e is structured, it's very hard to like have a permadeath in
Absolutely.
D&D.
Well, I'll also talk about a D&D. Well, it's less of a specific story D&D wise, but since we're on the D&D train, I play at a table with. I played at a table with mostly like veteran players. We had a podcast for a bit. We had a couple episodes, and then that kind of fell through for scheduling issues. But most of the players stayed, and the rest of us we started a new campaign with mostly the same table. But what I have found really, really cool is we brought in two new players, and they're not like new players that have never played, but they're a little bit more green than some of the players at our table, and they've not really met or played with the other four of us. much. They're like these two strangers coming into a new situation, and the way our DM runs the games is like very like it's pretty intense story wise. Like the sessions are like are pretty deep, usually pretty dark, and like you kind of get in your head about stuff. And I guess this is all to say like commending these two players that are new to this table on being able to like come into this situation, immediately be like vulnerable as players, play honestly, and like just be in this space with who used to be strangers, and just like have fun and play and tell story and take things to directions where you wouldn't normally take them. Also, the last session we played, this was a me thing, but I totally made a decision that felt so honest, and I feel really bad because it really tanked the DM's plans for the session. But you know, it was still really I still had fun. I think everyone else still had fun, but
Those are the players that I try to kill immediately, but obviously I fail.
I would take it. But he likes my pet chicken too much, so I don't think he can kill me.
Don't want you to give any context for that.
Nope. None.
But in the meantime, our guest today is none other than Kylie Olsen, who has a lot of ties to role-playing games. In fact, along with her partner in crime, create their own role-playing scenarios. And you'll hear a lot about that in the interview that's happening next.
You know what? Let's dig in. All right, everyone. Today we're joined by a colleague, a friend, a co-podcaster. There's another connection we have, but we'll wait to announce that maybe down the line. This is Kylie Olsen, host of Survive This Crit. Welcome on the podcast, Kylie.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me. Excited to be here.
And very important question, because I'm stupid and I'm just making this in my head. Is to survive this crit supposed to be like survive this bleep? But it's
no,
crit.
survive this crit, like critical role.
Right.
You're surviving the crit rolls, yeah.
Oh, okay. See, I in my head I was like, oh, is this like, will I survive this bleep? And you said crit because it's funny and is like a critical role. I don't know. There's something.
I mean,
there.
it could be a pun for survive this hit, but it's
yeah. Survive this hit. Survive.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a pun, so I need to know.
We do
No,
love
you're
puns, and
good.
surprisingly, no puns in We Eat Stories for Breakfast, because we literally eat stories for breakfast. All right, Kylie, before we get too carried away, we gave a little intro of you at the beginning of the podcast, but our audience wants to hear from you. Just like, what is your story? Tell us about who Kylie Olsen is.
Gosh, I am just a menagerie of madness in my mind most of the time. But I grew up as a theater kid. I trained in dance and singing and acting and was determined that I was going to be on Broadway as a child. And once I got to high school and started doing that really stressful auditioning process for colleges, I became less enamored with that idea, because something that I'd always loved growing up doing was just basic storytelling, telling imaginary games in my backyard with my sister, forcing her to play the little orphan or the villain or whatever I could get her to do with me. So in college, I ended up actually majoring in theater arts at Oklahoma City University for 2 years. And then I realized that I was in Oklahoma and I wanted to work more in the film industry. And I realized that probably to do that, I should live a little bit closer. So I transferred my junior year to Loyola Marymount, still studying theater, but getting involved more on the film side. And my gateway into that was actually casting, because it was close enough to being an actor because I knew what the other side looked like. So I ended up interning for a casting director who was amazing. She really kind of opened my eyes as to what TV and film was looking like at the time. And then I promptly graduated in December of 2020 and ended up moving to Virginia with my fiance, now husband. And when I moved, I had no idea what my life would look like. I had just graduated college. I had no idea. I just imagined that like all my life hopes and dreams were basically gone. So I started doing odd jobs like bartending, walking dogs, being a barista. And in between that, I was constantly emailing casting directors about jobs, even if they weren't hiring. Any like casting director in the DMV that would see me, I emailed them, tried to get a hookup, and thankfully a few of them responded, and I got an opportunity to work in background casting for TV and commercial casting. And that door led to another opportunity to cast TV background casting, which I continued to do for, I believe, 2 shows and another pilot that never aired. And at the end of that, I honestly was like a little burnt out. I realized that as much as I loved being in the TV verse, it was really draining, especially mid-COVID, where you're on your computer for 12 to 15 hours a day, responding to emails from people, getting yelled at by people. I mean, seeing your names in the credits was really cool, and knowing that you're filling in the story, you're filling in the background and creating this universe for people to live in was really cool and rewarding. But by the end of it, I realized that I wanted to be more involved in the actual storytelling that was happening, not so much in the, I guess, the exterior of the storytelling. So I ended up quitting that job. And after taking a little break and a side hustle into consulting actors in the DC area, I actually spent a lot of time teaching them how to tell stories, how to use their bodies and their breath and their voice to tell interesting stories through their acting. And all the while doing that, I was meeting with people who were producers and coordinators to learn what tools I would need to become a better storyteller. Because in my mind at the time, and still, that I wanted to be a producer, because they get to have their hand in everything and they get to be a part of the story from start to finish. And I think while being in casting, I felt like I was having a little FOMO because I wasn't as involved in the story as I wanted to be. So in early 2023, I got hired by the video production company that I'm currently working for in the operations and billing department, because I realized that to be a producer, I needed to learn how to work with all types of people in production and to be able to understand money in production and how that works and what rates are and how they are allocated, and being involved in things on that side. So that's how I got started there. And then around that time, my brother-in-law came to me with wanting to start a podcast about, he wanted to combine our love for horror movies and RPGs. And together we sat down and thought, hey, like, why don't we just see if we can survive against these monsters every episode? And because I'm me and I love over analyzing and fixating on things, I loved the concept of taking a chance to deep dive every movie and figure out how they're made. And that is how Survive the Script was born. We took our love for horror movies and created RPGs out of them, and we're still doing that today. And I'm doing a lot of other writing and creative projects, but a lot of those are going to have more things to come. So not all of them are public yet. So yeah.
That's awesome.
That was a chaotic version.
Oh, no, the chaotic version. But I feel like a lot of different storytellers and artists, and especially ones in like the performance industry, or at least like the film and video and media industries, just we all have a lot going on, a lot of different like avenues. Like you were saying, you work for a video production company, you started a podcast, you've worked in casting before, but you wanted to do more with it, which led you to where you are. Plus some writing stuff, which now I'm intrigued about, but I won't push too hard because we're gonna respect the privacy and the comfort. But that's really cool, and also like I don't know, relatable to so many people.
I also something I'm struck by in the idea of telling somebody your story. Like that question is most of these questions are purposely vague in general to give the person sort of an open runway, if you will, to take off. But I'm thinking of my own personal life and my career right now because right now I'm back to bartending because I lost my job at a professional theater and I'm sort of like waiting and looking for the next thing. But like I think of my parents' generation and the one before them, and my mom always thinks that I should just show up to the theater I want to run one day and say, "Can I work as a janitor?" and then work my way up. When really like that's not how it works anymore. You kind of just bounce around from thing to thing. You meet somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who gets you this thing, and I'm just struck by the way of every generation's story has a similar structure depending on the sort of infrastructure, if you will, that's around it, right? So back in my parents' time, you could start as a janitor at McDonald's and end up being the CEO one day. Nowadays, you have to be what you're doing and be like, I worked for a production agency, but then I thought I should go do this because that'll help me get to where I want here. Oh, I met somebody who's had an interesting project and we just did that together. And you say, sorry for the chaotic version of it, but it's just what it is, right? It is chaotic, but that's kind of what, as people who want to be creatives for our living, that's just kind of what we have to do.
It
Yeah, to be
totally
honest-
is. And
to be
the
honest,
networking side,
If you heard my background of jobs and work, which is not all industry related at all, and
yeah.
how I got to where I am, it is significantly more chaotic.
left out some footnotes because there's a
That's
lot,
okay.
and
That's
I didn't
okay.
want to take the whole day. But like, I
No,
get
I want to
it.
know
There's
every
such-
bar you've worked at.
You know what? I actually only worked at one, and then was like, actually two. One, I was let go after like 2 weeks.
Oh no,
It
what'd
was-
you do?
Well, I actually quit because the manager hit on me, and
Oh.
I was uncomfortable with that because I told him I was
Yikes.
engaged. So
Well, that's a decent
that
reason to
was-
quit.
yeah, well, and then the person told me I couldn't even finish my shift, so I cried on the metro all the way back home.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
I was just talking to my buddy and reflecting about how bartending has always been a transitional thing for me, that I always get my next big thing once I start bartending again. And I don't know, like I had an idea of like it's a comfortable job for me that I am confident that I'm good at, and so that gives me the confidence to like do well in the interview of the next place. But it's happened at every major stage of my life, as my next one was preceded by bartending. But that's interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
There's
dive
a
deeper into
trend.
it. There's something there. So I thank you for sharing your chaotic self a little bit with us. We'll get to some more of that. A second question here is a little bit more broad about storytelling itself, and define what storytelling or story is to you.
Ooh.
This is my favorite
so-
question because we get something wildly different every time.
Yeah, so when I saw this question in the email you guys sent me, and honestly, I think the first thing that I think of is that a story is something that connects people. It allows you to connect and grow deeper with another person through art and through storytelling and through putting part of who you are into a work of art. But I think also with stories and storytelling, the other side that I've been thinking about lately as I've been doom scrolling as one does, is the power dynamic that comes with a story. There's so much power behind stories, and oftentimes people take stories as truth, even when they're not. So I think that's something I've been reflecting on a lot lately, is that even some of the best told stories aren't necessarily true, even if they're meant to be painted in that sort of light. Or on the other hand, there's something that is so pure and so true, they're bringing us closer together as people. So I think that's such a loaded question. I'm glad that you asked it, because there's so much there.
I think it's so funny because I can't remember what guest it was, but somebody's answer for this was stories are things, or like vehicles for truth. It's about like finding truth. And you were like, stories don't have to be true to be good. And I think that's really funny. It's also, this episode will be out after the election, but I think it's funny that we're a week away from the election and you're like, some stories people are telling online are not true right now.
Yeah, well, that's just me and my doom scrolling. Whenever something random pops in my feed, you always have to take those stories. And I mean, we work in video production, Chandler and I currently do, and it's always interesting seeing how stories are crafted to make a certain person's or certain perspective's truth clearer.
Right, but
whether or not like
that connects back with your thesis of that stories are something that connects people. And so
yeah.
stories are making connections, and whether what the message they're telling is true or not is irrelevant to the definition of you're just connecting with somebody. And that's the vehicle for it, which I like a lot. That's cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, very dynamic, talking about the dynamics of story. I mean, I don't know if this is, Adam, I know you're still on the East Coast, but you're not in the DMV, and Kylie, you're not in the DMV anymore. But to me, that's something I didn't really realize until being here about just that whole, like you mentioned, that power dynamic between truth and not truth and story, and how, like, if you think about how many film and movie references and TV references and book references people will make in their day-to-day life. Some of them are fun, but some are like life lessons that they get from things that are written by somebody who didn't experience, act like works of fiction. And people will like take these morals and these truths from these acts of fiction. And sometimes what I find interesting, and I hate that I just said interesting, but what I find raises my curiosity is how a lot of those truths you can find in story are, one, sometimes not intended by the author at all. And so it's something we as audiences are finding in the story and are reflecting on. But two, how even if it is intended and even if it is fiction, how it still speaks to a lot of times core truth of humanity or life.
Yeah, that's why I think one of my favorite genres or expressions of storytelling is stories about the human experience, because there's so many different avenues that you can explore, and there's almost always something relatable. And that's why, I mean, I find myself coming back to certain shows or certain films because of that, because there's something that I get out of it every time I watch, or there's something that I can connect with, or I can share it with somebody else and connect with them on a different level than I had before.
Yeah, we talked with Nika about songwriting and about the idea of a song, like in a musical theater production, happens when somebody is feeling something so deep and complex they can't help but sing. And so I like the idea that that's not just unique to musicals or music itself, but it's like you just said, the human condition. It's something that we will actually never fully understand. So we reach for these fantastical things to try and hold on to, like, even just a kernel of understanding of what it means to be human, which I really love.
And which a lot of times I feel like a lot of, like, the most common, and maybe not the most common, maybe I'm generalizing, but it seems to me the most common kind of reflection and learning we get is like helping process things that we're feeling. Things that we're going through that we don't know how to process otherwise, which kind of leads to like our next question, Kylie, which is talking about emotional responses and how stories have emotional impacts on us. So the next question is, what is a story that you have experienced or read or witnessed, or I guess experienced is the best word. What's a story you've experienced that has provoked an emotional response from you?
Gosh, I feel like a cop-out answer would be all of them. I'm a person with really big feelings, and I feel like almost everything I consume has an emotional response of some sort. But I can think of something more specific, because I know that's what you're looking for.
So if you have something, that's great. I don't want to stop you from that. But if you're saying everything, I'm more interested in, is there a story that you have consumed recently that didn't provoke an emotional response in you? If it's so common for you, is there like a story that you were like, that didn't do anything for me?
Well, okay. I guess, let's see. Last night I was watching The Final Girls it's on Peacock right now. I'd never seen it. I was like strapped in for a campy, like kind of dumb horror movie, basically. But it actually kind of surprised me by the end. I came in with the expectation of being like, oh, this is going to be stupid. But it actually, by the end, I was like, oh, it's like about grief and letting go, and that's not what I expected. But on the flip side of that, I think, man, that's such an interesting question. I think probably there's stuff that I watch that is purely for comfort and almost white noise. So
That's
I would
fair.
say things like that. Like
That's fair.
The Office is one of our white noise shows that we have it on in the background. Gilmore Girls has pretty much reached that status as well. That as much as I love the story, I've actually been fortunate enough to work on a season of one of Amy Sherman Palladino's shows.
Ooh,
Yeah.
like
Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I worked on 3
my God.
episodes of
That's
season
so
5. But I was
so
remote.
cool.
I didn't get to like see anything. I just hired people and they went to set.
Right,
But
yeah.
knowing that in some of the Zoom meetings she was in that room, I was like, oh my gosh, hi, I'm unwell. But yeah, I would say like the shows that I consume so often that they've become white noise are probably the ones that no longer evoke an emotion in me other than just comfort.
I gotta say, I just still respect that you stuck to your guns and you were like, no, I am emotional about every story. Every story that I have, I find a way to emotionally connect with it, and that's such an admirable quality to have.
I think unfortunately it's a quality, positive quality, and like can be a vice because
Sure, but
it's,
we all
it's
think
like even with people, like I always
Yeah.
find something to connect with people, and it's sometimes very draining and exhausting to always be
Course.
that way.
But I also think as humans, we try to rationalize some things that should be our biggest strengths as somehow a weakness. I don't know that is a question. I don't know why we all do it, but I do it too. But we all try to do that somehow. So I don't. I would say it's more strength than weakness. But
I would argue we don't know that everyone sees strengths as weaknesses. There are some pretty arrogant people out there.
oh, I was gonna say.
Some people may just try and hide it, but
That's
I don't know.
true.
Maybe it's an evolutionary, always trying to improve thing.
I did finally think of like 2 things I saw this year that did not evoke an emotion. Okay. They're horror movies because, we're a horror podcast. Thanksgiving, the slasher film that came out last year.
That's sad. I heard it. I wanted it to be fun. I haven't seen it, but
It's fun, but I was like, this is dumb. They could have done so much more. And then the other one was a movie that is so much worse. It's one of those that was on Amazon and it was free, and I was like, this looks like it could be really stupid or really fun. And it was called Pot Zombies, and it looks like it was made with about $10 and like a free pizza. That looks like it's total budget.
well, I would have done a movie
So
for that.
Speaking of low budget horror movies, I will say I've never actually watched these myself because I don't want to. I don't like to ingest things that are like not well done, but recommended, I guess, sort of.
okay.
When I was in high school, I had friends that they more so, it was a talking point to never watch these movies because they were so bad. I believe one of them is called Rubber, which is, I think, about a possessed tire that pursues down its victims. And the other is called Frozen, not the Disney Frozen.
Not Disney's. Okay.
But I think it's about 2 passengers on a ski lift that get stuck there. And I think the entire movie is them stuck on the ski lift.
That sounds
So they're-
interesting.
oh my gosh.
So that one's less monster villain sort of hunty horror and more
It's like
you're
a
stuck.
psychological survival.
But yeah. But if you want to have like a TTRPG session where you're trying to survive a possessed tire,
tire?
like
Honestly?
that,
That's an idea. That's what
gift
I'm
you
going to
this
write
idea.
down and do some more research on.
I'm like imagining that they win the final confrontation of this film of like leading them to a slippery road with ice on it and be like, you forgot to put the chains on for the season, and they slide on and they win something stupid like that. I don't know.
Well, the ski lift is interesting too because I've actually been like, there's no worse feeling than being on a ski lift and it's stopping, especially when it's like,
That does sound
I mean,
scary.
most recently it was when I was in Whistler, Canada, like 3 years ago. We're at the very top of like the peak that you can go on a ski lift, and it's probably 100 yards before we can get off the lift, and it's like blistering cold. It's like in the negatives, and your chair is just swinging because of the ice wind. Ever so
That sounds
slightly,
scary.
while you're stuck up there. So I don't know.
Yeah, see, that
maybe
concept
that
sounds
Frozen
promising.
one could be Yeah, see,
We'll check it
Thanksgiving,
out.
the concept was promising.
Yes, it was.
As
It really
we'll
was.
talk about on our podcast. But it just did not deliver at
Well,
all.
so far you're doing a better job of our other guests is plugging your thing. Everybody else was kind of afraid to say anything, which it's fine. I want people to do that, but next question. What's a story that you find yourself referencing a lot?
It's a great segue, Adam.
I'm you will find nobody better at a non sequitur than me.
No, that was beautiful. Referencing a lot. This is such a obnoxiously like film school answer in some ways, but
It's okay. I love film schools.
I think I reference The Princess Bride a lot.
That's a great answer.
Right? I quote it at least once a week. Usually I'll always jump in with a "you mock my pain" when my husband asks something very normal of me, like, "Hey, let's put this away," and I'm like, "You mock my pain."
That's actually hilarious.
But that's probably what I find myself referencing the most. Generally speaking, 80s movies, I find myself referencing either their storytelling or quotable moments from it very often, because I like the way that stories were told.
I love The Princess Bride. When I used to teach script analysis, it's one of the films I used. But I will say two things. One of these is a very embarrassing thing about me. So,
Okay.
One is you'd be surprised the amount of people who have not seen Princess Bride. There's a lot of them. And two, I do the
Shame.
secret thing that when I have a crush on somebody and they ask me to do something, I say "as you wish." Try to wink at them, and nobody ever gets it. But
Gosh.
there are people in my life right now that I say it to, and they don't realize why I'm doing it.
Wait, you've been
My
saying that to
gosh.
me and signing all your emails to me with
Anyway,
that.
what's the next question?
There's a bromance brewing.
Well, actually, speaking of, The Princess Bride and other great 80s films and script analysis and film school, we're going to say you can't say The Princess Bride because you already used it as an answer. But, I guess we're not asking for specifics. No. Looking at, like, so many good stories, so ignore Frozen, ignore Rubber. I forgot to mention Troll 2, which I have no idea what Troll 2 is about, but there's not a Troll 1.
Yeah.
So there's another
No.
horror movie for you. But what do you think makes a good story? Like, what goes into these good stories? Like these good, like Scream or The Princess Bride, or in my case, Alien. Like, what makes a good story?
Well, so it's funny that you brought up Alien, because I actually talked about it on our show as not liking it. But other stories, it's only because my reasoning was
The xenomorph is terrifying and should never have existed. I agree.
no, I really like stories that it circles back to that desire of understanding the human experience more. And I think for me, getting to know your characters and having a deep and personal relationship with your characters is really important for a good story. Like for Scream, like, that Billy and Stu, there's something between them that is just so much deeper than what's written. And that our final girl has been through so much because they built up such a strong backstory about her. And then, of course, you have the, like, fun, tropey side characters who all die. But, like, generally speaking, it's a story about, like, these very human experiences that they're going through and why Billy and Stu are driven to do what they do is actually so much deeper than what a traditional slasher movie would portray on screen. So I think that would be, like, my answer of, like, the desire to understand the human experience more would be the keys to having a good story.
Do you think that good horror films always end up being character studies like that simply because the dramatic and fantastical elements of it, to drive somebody to that heightened experience, you need to have deep character justifications for it?
I think that, like, it's again kind of a subgenre thing and almost a preference, because there are some great slasher movies. Like there's a movie that I love called Killer Clowns from Outer Space. It is so campy, and it's so campy, and most people don't like it because of how campy and like it's not very deep. But I love it because it's fun and it evokes something in me. So I think while it's my preference is to find stories that dive into the human experience, like for example, there's a great writer, he writes horror stories, Grady Hendrix. He wrote A Southerner's Book Club's Guide to Killing Vampires.
I've read that book.
I have like 4 of his books on my bookshelf right over there. And his stories, while they're always horror based, they also have this deep underlying character study of what these characters are actually going through, whether it's grief or whether it's loneliness or longing. There's something bigger there. And I think stories are powered to be stronger when they have that underlying desire. Because every like human has a desire that's driving them, you know?
He also just like is so gruesome. Like I almost don't want to recommend it to people because it's horrifyingly gruesome.
Yeah, just go in with the mindset that it's very gory. But if you like gore, he's a really fun author to read if you enjoy that type of stuff.
There's a scene in Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires that has a bug in an attic that I still like cringe at when I randomly think about it. But regardless, I love the idea of you saying what makes a good story is like good, like deep characters and rich arcs and stuff. And I think that's something that is that it's like at the core of TTRPGs. And so I think it makes total sense that you do TTRPGs as your thing, which leads into the next question of which format of storytelling are you most well versed in? Do you consider it to be role-playing games, or do you consider it something else?
Ooh, yeah, this was another one when I saw this question, and I'm not trying to be like humble or anything, but like I don't feel like I can say I'm super well versed in anything. It's like if a story comes to my mind, like as a high schooler, a way that I processed a lot of really big feelings was through poetry. Like high school and college, I have like a whole Google Docs of just poems that I wrote. And like my brain isn't necessarily wired to be in that space right now, but that was something I would say I was well versed in that season. So right now I play a lot in the RPG space. And I love improvisational storytelling. I've always loved that. I think whether we were playing, I don't know if you guys grew up playing Mafia as kids where people had their different cards. I always would try to personalize the story that I was telling to my audience.
So they always forced you to be the narrator?
Oftentimes, but I would choose to be the narrator because I'm bad at being anything else because I give myself away.
I'm
not always good at being the other ones.
My family never lets me be a player. I'm always the de facto narrator. They won't let me.
Oh my gosh.
The one time they let me play, they voted me off because they said we want Adam to be the narrator, and it killed me.
All right, so if you guys are needing a slightly different but the same concept of a game that doesn't need a specific narrator but still has the same story arc, there's a few board games that are like this. One of them, there's one.
Secret Hitler.
I'm not a big fan of Secret Hitler, mostly just because.
You okay?
I dropped my water. Yeah, don't mind me. Sorry.
Pick that water back up. Don't drop it. I'm not a big fan of Secret Hitler, not because of the specifics of like the game itself, but I don't know. The idea of having a game and profiting off of Hitler's name feels weird to me. But I personally, it leans a little bit more TTRPG. I have a game called Avalon, which is similar to Mafia. It leans more like Among Us, where you have your secret imposters trying to kill everybody, but everyone else has an overarching goal other than to just find the villains. Like you're going on quest.
Cool. I'll have to write
that
down.
Similar to, have you ever played the game Haunting a House on the Hill or something like that? I think
Betrayal at House on the Hill.
At House on the Hill. That's a great game. That's also like there's an imposter, but you don't know who it is.
Yeah. Similar, but Avalon more leans like Mafia, so it is more storytelling. It's about your conversations and voting to essentially kill each other.
That's great.
It's more of a social game than it is a strategy. I mean, it's a strategy. Yeah. It's more of a social game than a board game.
And Betrayal is fun, but it's one of those games that, like, if you don't know how to play it, it takes a lot of time to learn. I've played it a few times. At least, okay. The people I played it with, it took me a while. Yeah. Oh, you're a board game guy. Yes. My co-host would love you. He's a board game guy. That's like his.
So one of my best friends, my best friend married his sister, who's my other best friend, and him and his wife are big board game people. He will Kickstarter like anything. He's got so many board games in his closet. And I said, how's the board game closet going, bud? He's like, it's more of a hallway now. That's how intense he is. And all my favorite board games are too complex for people to learn, and I hate it.
So I guess we're all... sorry, I didn't mean for us to both talk at the same time. I feel like for listeners hearing this, Adam and I will have already met in person for the first time.
That's true.
At the time of recording this, we have only met via video call. Like, we're recording this right now via video, but we are both attending PAX Unplugged.
We are.
The PAX conventions it's the Penny Arcade Expo. They do an Unplugged conference in Philly every December that is all focused on board games. So like regular PAX, there's an East and a West, one in Seattle, one in Boston, that are like video games, board games, card games. But PAX Unplugged is solely focused on tabletop games, tabletop RPGs, dice games, card games, stuff like that.
I'm going to spend so much money because I love board games.
That actually sounds like I would enjoy going to something like that, because probably the average demographic is like slightly more introverted people like me, and, you know, people who just want to talk about games. I mean, I'm not super into the very complicated, takes 3 hours to learn board games, but I love a good card game. We've been playing a lot of Here to Slay, which is like a very, very simplified D&D kind of thing where you build up your party and you kill monsters. And
I've heard of this. Sounds fun.
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. My best friend's boyfriend got us hooked on it, and we've been forcing anybody to play it that will play it. Both my parents know how to play it. My husband's parents know how to play it now, and they're all in their mid-50s, so anyone can learn. It's simple to learn.
I will say, I'm pretty sure that Matt Mercer is going to be at PAX Unplugged plugging their new RPG game, Daggerheart.
TTRPG.
And we're going to try to sneak
him
into that.
And
Ashley Johnson.
And Ashley.
I think they're going to sneak in. So I think we're going to try to sneak into that conference.
I need to figure out what they call their security staff, or I'm thinking about bringing my camera and gimbal just so that I look like I'm working the event.
Amazing.
You should just grab a press pass from the company we work at. And bring
I can just make my own press pass, to be honest.
Oh, that too.
I have technically
I'm not suggesting bad things, but
it's
90% of the time. 90% of the time, I know this is an event that other people bad. If you just act like you belong somewhere, most people are not going to say anything.
I think there's like a kind of old wives' tale, not really old and not really a wives' tale, but if you carry a ladder around with you anywhere or a clipboard, people will just let you.
I've actually seen videos of that where people can do it.
Theater, if you have a ladder, they think you're working.
People in their head make up the story that you belong there.
Yeah,
all about stories.
It's all about stories.
All about stories. They're connecting something to you. They're like, there's a connection there, and that's true, whether or not it is.
This episode's sponsored by PAX Unplugged.
Absolutely. So Adam and I are going to be getting well versed in the storytelling method of deception and with withholding truths. But Kylie, you kind of answered this already, but didn't specifically. So you mentioned that you don't feel like there's one specific like format of storytelling that you are like I'll just super exposed or like very, very well versed in. But what is, you kind of mentioned there's not really one, but you mentioned some that interest you, but like what's an avenue that you are less exposed to, maybe you have less experience in, or you haven't really tried your hand at, but is still of interest, it still fascinates you?
Let's see. I mean, I think in this particular season, like I had mentioned, poetry was my thing in high school and college. I was musical theater girly during that season too, so I was singing musical theater and classical music. I think what I'm learning right now, what I'm getting well versed in, I'm not currently, it's one that still intimidates me a little bit, is screenwriting. I've been working on a couple of short film projects in a couple of different genres with different writers. So I'm learning to communicate with these different writers and what their needs are from me, and trying to figure out like how this story in my head, how I can see it so clearly, how I get it down on the page in a way that's understandable for other people. So I would say probably screenwriting. It's something that I never took a class in, but I've been learning from other people. And yeah, I guess that would be it.
I wouldn't pretend to be an amazing screenwriter, but I did used to teach script analysis at some point. So I think I know a thing or two. But the thing I
Yeah.
used to, I'm sure you all already know this, but like, this is also lends to like what I consider to be good screenplays and good, stories is the show don't tell aspect of it. Of like, instead of somebody saying, oh, I wake up every morning tired and I don't know what to do with myself. Instead of that, there's like a scene of the person waking up and it's hard for them to get up, right? That's the example I always give to when I was
Yeah.
teaching it. But I like I think that, to tie this into like being less well versed in, like when I used to teach that class, we separated it into separate sections of plays, and then episodic TV, and then film, because they're all very different, and they're trying to accomplish similar goals of character arcs and 3 arc structures and stuff, like in 3 act structures and things like that. But they're all very different, and their goals are in the sort of benchmarks they have to hit to accomplish their goals are very different too. So you're like,
Yeah.
screenplay is absolutely a very unique art form, different from all those other writing platforms.
I feel like it's
Thank
such
you.
a vulnerable thing to screenwrite too, because I mean, as a filmmaker, I try to sometimes because I need something written to be able to shoot and edit, but it's one of the it is, like Adam is saying, a very different way of writing, but then also the vulnerability of knowing that if you're not going to be the one that if you want to see it executed to like the finish, if you're just writing for the art of writing, that could be one thing, but if you want to see ideally a final piece at the end, you have to be able to craft this child of yours and then give it away for someone else to give their interpretation of.
It's also the hardest form, I think, of writing outside of maybe novelists, right? But even that is so very personal. But like, because I think that playwriting, all forms of writing are impossible. I just want to make that very clear. As somebody who is a writer and tries to, like, they're all impossible, and you never love what you've written, even when they're accepted into festivals. You're like, that was shitty. I could do better. But movie and script writing is so much more difficult than the other avenues, because in episodic television you have so much more time to tell your story, because you can let scenes breathe
Yeah.
and have time for it. And live plays and musicals, I think there's a level of grace that are given to those that aren't film and television, because it's a live thing. And so when you're sitting there, you're just impressed that anybody did that, because it's wild that they just sat, you know what I mean? So even if it's bad, I'm like, well, that was hard to do, so good job. With screenwriting, I feel like
Yeah.
there's this level of like expectation, because film is such a vehicle is probably the number one vehicle for storytelling in our world today, I would say. And there's such an expectation of excellence, and by the time the film is out, you're like, well, you did all this work on it, it must be good because you did all this work on it.
Yeah.
So like, to be a screenwriter, I think is such a vulnerable place to put yourself in, so kudos to you.
I want to mention. Go ahead, Kylie.
Sorry. Well, I was going to mention, when you're talking about the vulnerability side, I think as a recovering perfectionist, this is one of the few times I've not felt as much of that, as much of like, oh gosh, it's not perfect. And that's because I don't know if you guys have read The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I've read it quite a few times. I'm actually on the last week again, but it's a good reminder of, there comes a certain point, like when you're an actor and you're doing a play or you're doing a musical, that you just have to let it go. And I think when I was an actor, that wasn't something I learned soon enough. And playing in these other mediums is helping me to let it go sooner, especially when I'm collaborating with other people. Because at a certain point, we had like one of the shorts that we're having people do a Passover right now. I could have sat and overanalyzed it and saw things differently, but I've been trying to get better about seeing like, oh, I really like the way that this one scene kind of fell together with the way that we wrote it, versus getting stuck on the mindset of like, dang, that one scene of mine got cut. I wish it hadn't. Because it's really easy to get stuck in that mentality of like, I wish I could have done this or that. And I think that's something that when I was acting primarily totally paralyzed me.
You just said something that I think unlocked a really intense barrier in my brain on my path to writing something. Because when I'm writing, I've had a handful of one acts in play festivals before and competitions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I'm writing those, I'm so mean to myself because I'm like, you went to school for theater. You're an actor, a director, a writer. These need to be, there's a level that you have to hit or you're just bad because you should know this. But I've been trying to write a novel and I'm being that same level of mean to myself. But you saying, I'm letting myself have grace and letting it go because it's not something that I like am as well versed in or whatever, I think is such a beautiful way to look at it because you're giving yourself grace because you don't know as much and you're in the process of learning. And when in reality, that should be what all art creation is that we're all continually learning and continually getting better. So if we all just gave ourselves more grace to learn and fail and get better, then we would create better art. And so that like just unlocked a deep lock within my brain.
I'm so
Adam,
glad.
you are
Well,
now.
it's that idea of playing. That's what
Yes.
I always try to remind myself.
I
It's
love
like
that.
we're all playing together
Yes.
and we're playing in this space. That's why whenever I work with somebody on set or in like I'm writing with somebody, I always try to phrase it as if like we're getting together to play.
I love that.
We're not taking ourselves too seriously because I've oh my gosh, had so many a like meltdown and panic attack over a self tape that like the casting director probably wouldn't even look at. Like that's just reality. If I could have just let myself enjoy it more, then
Chandler, I am thinking of something right now, but I'm wondering it. So you have said one of your favorite role playing moments that you had, but it was a very specific thing, and I want to reference it right now, but I want to give you the space to explain it because I'm talking too much.
Because you're talking too much, or because it was my moment?
Yes.
And you want to give grace for me?
Yes.
I believe I know.
Sorry,
Is
Chandler.
it the? No, you're good. I have a bad habit of I love listening to people talk. It's one of the reasons I wanted to get into this, do this podcast with Adam. Is I want to create a space for other people to come in and share their perspective and their story. And sometimes
my ADHD brain kicks in, and I have to get
Well-
passionate about something.
well, and I'm like, well, I'm here
Two.
wanting to facilitate the space. I'm wanting to, like, my purpose here, I need to remind myself, Adam's doing a great job, is to create the space and to have listeners recognize Adam and myself and come back for the conversation we facilitate, but I have to be present for that to happen, which is wonderful. Are you talking about the fist moment or the epic moment at the end?
Technically both, but the
There
epic
was-
moment at the end is the one that came to mind.
Okay, I thought you were talking about the emotional early moment.
Wait, yes, sorry,
are you-
yes. I
You're
thought
talking about the one shot, correct?
yes, I had it backwards. I thought your favorite moment was the epic moment, and mine was the emotional moment. But mine is the emotional moment.
I will explain both. The reason I like the epic moment at the end is because of Adam's face, but we'll get there. So we were playing this one shot, right? And this is the first time Adam was like, it's gonna be a high level one shot. We're starting at level 15. I personally never played a character at level 15. This was one of the first times I told myself I'm going to not get too invested and build a character that has 1,000 different things that's like fully min-maxed, and instead I'm going to do kind of a meme of a character build so I can focus on kind of who this person is. So for those who are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, I will name some feats and stuff but if you're not, he's a dwarf. He had some extra health because of his subclass. He's a sorcerer. He had some extra health because of the type of sorcerer he was, and he had a feat that gave him extra health. So sorcerers traditionally really weak. He is a dwarf, comes from like a war clan background. He's like this really tough, I can handle anything, but he's really just like this charismatic, kind dwarf. And he's just seemingly tough and wants to just like be this protective, fierce guy. And then there's just this moment where I don't even remember why or what happened, but there's some emotional moment that happened. It was like we're in a castle or in some mansion. It's late at night. We just finished dinner.
Yeah, we were
and
at
someone
dinner
like
table.
and someone shared some sort of like emotional moment from character to character. And I just remember not me who right now is a bad example of this podcast where I like to listen, because when I play D&D I really like to talk. And for the first time I was like, I don't have anything my character would say. And so as a 6'1" man describing like a 3.5 foot dwarf reaching up to a regular sized person's thigh and just like tapping him with his fist because he's choked up and like just has nothing.
That's beautiful.
That was Adam's favorite moment. Mine was when he faced off against a fully sized adult dragon and just this tiny little guy just like, you're going to back the F off. And
Worked.
I don't know. I had kind of a growly dragon voice, and then I think I might have rolled a nat 20.
Well, what was crazy was the reason it worked was because you justified it. Like, I wouldn't have let anybody else in the one shot do it, but you were like, I'm a dragon sorcerer. I have this background in this, and the reason why I think I am justified and asking this of this villain is this. And I said, great, then you can roll for it, and it worked, and that's why it drove me crazy. But the reason why I wanted to say that is because we found those moments when we were being free and playing. That's why it popped in my head, right? And I remember vividly that moment of the fist thing, because my character that I was playing at the time, who turned out to be the villain, said something about like something about love, and a problematic person at the table said something vaguely homophobic. And I remember having a moment of like utter defense and teardown of what his ideology was in that moment without even being vehement, because you and I were such in that moment about like, because it was a conversation about love and just like any love is good love inherently. And I remember being like, I get choked up in intense moments when I want to say the perfect thing, and that wasn't even on my mind in that moment, because we were having such a good time playing and creating a cool story together that it just made sense for what we did. And that's why I loved it so much. And that's why I love what you're saying about the concept of play, Kylie, and not having what's the word I'm looking for, stakes on it.
Yeah. Well, it's hard in acting school. I mean, as you guys have taken acting classes, I know Chandler's acted some, and Adam, you've mentioned that too. It's like they always tell you to raise the stakes. And a lot of times, like when you're going to school for it, you're getting graded on that. You're getting graded on how good you can interpret what that means. And I remember one of my favorite projects I got to work on in college was actually a D&D play, She Kills Monsters. Amazing play. It actually ended up getting moved to Zoom because COVID hit, so we ended up performing it virtually. We were one of the first and maybe one of the only that did it virtually, because it's such a interactive play. You're playing with swords like the entire time. But one of those nights I remember so clearly of... because it's a story about grief and loss and what it means to overcome that. And that was a season for me where I was overcoming loss in my own. So it was a character I was very, very close to. And one of those nights, like probably the last or second to last rehearsal we had in person right before the shutdown, I made my director tear up somehow. And I don't know how. It was just me actually being in the moment. Yeah. And it's one of those things, like, I'm not very good at being in the moment. I always worry about something in the past, or I'm thinking ahead. And it's cool to be in an art space and an art form where you can step outside of that. And I think RPGs are a great way to force you to be present.
That's why I cry every time I play D&D.
Every single time.
Literally the last 5 sessions at Alex Table, I've cried. Not joke. Every time.
It's... You're a crier. I just want to touch on one quick thing that's a little bit back how you mentioned kind of on the raising the stakes, and how in acting and even in storytelling, like the key question is what is the most interesting thing that can happen right now, and like a way to like raise the stakes to make a story more compelling. But just when you said that, it made me think of like the contrast between raising the stakes in story and how high the stakes need to be compared to this comparing story to real life, or these references that we make, or these ways that we relate to story or take story as truth, and the dynamics between story and life is just kind of, I feel like, one of those dynamics that leads us to then raise stakes in our own life and have that high pressure of everything seems more important or more drastic or more dire than it usually is, which is something that I personally struggle with. Also with writing, or with like career stuff, or needing to do the best job on a certain job. And it's like, if I'm not doing it perfect, why am I doing it? And I think that's been a roadblock I've had with writing. That plus like ADHD kind of blocking the ability to do that. But it's like really hard to do something when you know it's not up to standards. But like Adam was also saying earlier, reminding that those stakes that need to be high, those high stakes are for the stories. Those high stakes are not for our life.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Unless it's actually beautiful. High stakes.
No, that's beautiful the way you phrase that, because it's easy to get in that mindset of like everything is high stakes. That's how I'm wired. Everything, like, usually if something small falls out of place, I'm like, it's the end of the world. I'm not going to be okay. And it's so not most of the time. And that's something, I have a very somewhat more type B husband who constantly reminds me of that. It's like, it's not the end of the world. But in my mind, it's spiraling down a dark hole that I'm never going to get out of.
That's really fun because as a human being, I'm definitely type B, but as an artist, I'm type A.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm
have a conversation about that another time because we'll spend way too much time. We got to get to our final question because this has been such a great conversation, and I love. No, it's okay. We've had such great conversations about storytelling and what you think is a good story, and things that you go back to and things that you don't. At the top of the episode, you told us your story of your life. If you had to tell that story, and if like in the answering of this question, if you want to tell other bits of it using this question, please feel free. But if you had to tell your story to somebody without using, you mentioned two avenues of storytelling that you're most well versed in. You mentioned role playing, and then you mentioned poetry when you were younger. So if you couldn't use those two vehicles for telling your story, how would you tell your story?
Ooh, gosh. I feel like the easy answer would be like some sort of screenwriting.
That's
but
cool.
I think outside of that, what I'm drawn to is I really enjoyed movement and fight choreography in college. I took a lot of classes in that, and I got a couple certifications. And I think like a movement piece and fight choreo would be a really cool way to tell my story. And explore the different genres and music through that.
Please feel free to say more if you want to, but just so you know, right next to me is I've got two swords right here.
Oh my gosh.
That I got at the Ren Fair the last 2 years because I also love stage combat as well. That's really interesting. I think that's so cool. So like, would it be like you're like one of the characters is you, and you're sort of like coloring what your life has looked like in context of combat, or like would it be a full sort of production and the combat would be the catharsis of the piece?
I think it would be like a little bit more abstract, like playing through different seasons of my life as like a kid, focusing more on my era as a dancer, and like there's a few short plays I've written that are primarily choreography because it's something my brain relates to, even though I'm not necessarily the best dancer by any means or best movement choreographer, but there's something about the way that we move that speaks volumes, and throwing weapons in that is just so much more fun. So probably at like the more climactic moments of my life,
I agree.
Would totally have like a dope sword fight, or like playing with something like a morning star, or like a battle axe, or something cool, that's kind of takes you into a different avenue of the story. But I probably would tell my story in a much more abstract, arcing type way.
That's awesome.
And like not so straightforward.
It's a hard question. So Chandler and I did an episode 0, and we had a tough time answering it too. But that's why I like to ask it.
What were your answers?
I think you had a very similar in thematic way to what Adam answered as far as movement goes.
Yeah, I said some sort of movement dance piece that had like a interesting orchestration sort of behind it, but that is what I said.
Nice.
And I went, and I, in the future, since nothing's live now, we can't point. Well, I guess it was the episode 0, so we can't point to it at all. So we're just.
So unless you're a Patreon subscriber, you don't get to listen.
Then you're gonna, Adam's about to find out mine. No, mine was orchestral or symphony of some kind, following the ebb and flows of music. I think. I believe that the easiest way to convey the emotional story, if you want to do just pure emotion without context, you do that through music. And I think a symphony or full orchestra, I know those are two different things, everybody, is
Can you explain
really,
the difference, Chandler?
I can sure try. Man, it's been so long. I'm going to say this. This is me being vulnerable because I don't 100% know that I'm right here, so I'm going to say what I think it is,
go ahead.
and correct me.
I have no idea.
I believe an orchestra is a full band, brass, woodwind, percussion, and strings, and a symphony, I believe, is the same without strings.
So a symphony is a piece of music, whereas an orchestra are the humans who play the music.
So a symphony is... That is exactly what I said, Adam. Thank you for explaining already what I had in my head. I'm thinking, so I'm remembering back in band, we would have band concerts, and the difference between a band and an orchestra is that an orchestra also contains the strings.
Right.
But a symphony
Well,
would
I mean, like it's a much more complex definition, I believe. Like symphony is a large scale musical composition. So in theory, the people together do make the symphony, but they call it symphony orchestras because the orchestra is actually the live musicians who do it, and they play symphonies.
So then I would
See, I learned
be
something
accurate.
new.
I thought I had to be more specific in saying something symphony orchestral, but really I can just say I would tell my story through a symphony.
Yeah, that's
a proper
great.
symphony.
Yeah.
That makes me okay. So we learn. We're not all perfect. We learn, and that's okay. See, take the stakes off it. I can be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we lied. There is one more. There is one more question, Kylie, before we get you out of here.
And it is arguably
Okay.
the most important
Chandler
question.
needs to know, so Chandler's going to ask.
Yeah, Kylie, we need to know, what is your favorite breakfast? That can be
This is
something that you
hard
make
because
at
it
home. It can be what you
depends
go
on
and
my
get. It could
mood.
be, yeah.
Another way we've helped people sort of hone in on it is like what's maybe a go-to, because other people immediately knew what their favorite was, and then other people had a second and were like, okay, but what's your go-to? And so our first guest said what her go-to breakfast is most mornings. Keep in mind, we will be making this breakfast, so be as detailed as you like, because at the top of every episode, we eat and rank each breakfast.
Okay. Well, okay. Then I will probably list my go-to then, because I was thinking of a breakfast. There's a great spot in my hometown called Bear and Dragon, and they make this amazing like English breakfast, but it's like this breakfast sandwich. I don't even know how to describe it. It's amazing.
Sounds cool.
And they're always booked up. I almost can never get a seat there now because everyone knows where they are now. No one knew about them a year ago. It's fine. I'm not bitter. But Bear and Dragon, you should go check it out, or don't, because I want to be able to get
I
a
wrote it
seat.
down. I wrote it down.
Yeah,
It's on Adam and Chandler's
delicious.
breakfast story road trip list.
Yep.
But for me personally, probably what I have every morning, I start off the morning with a glass of lemon water because it's good for you. And I have my black coffee with my breakfast. And I usually will my husband will make it most mornings because I work on Eastern time. So I'm already a couple hours into my work day by the time I eat breakfast. But I'll do like a single piece of toast, gluten-free bread. You guys don't have to do the gluten-free bread because
we do.
Probably would
We do.
lower the ranking.
No, we do.
Oh
We
gosh,
need to.
it's gonna lower the ranking. If you're not used to it, you're not gonna like it. But a piece of buttered toast with 2 like over medium eggs on it, with some hot sauce, and a piece of, Trader Joe's has this new amazing bacon, and I don't remember the brand. I may take a picture of it and send it to you guys so you can get the full experience.
That'd be great.
But a piece
That'd be great.
of that bacon is just like chef's kiss. It's a great way to start the morning, and it's like the perfect little breakfast.
So there's a very important thing to mention here that some people might know, but you don't. I have never in my
Okay.
entire life drank a cup of coffee. And so I don't know if I should be breaking the streak just for a podcast, but
That's okay. You don't
you
have
did
to.
mention it on the list. So I don't know. I'm conflicted.
You asked me to be detailed, so I like coffee is part of my morning routine.
I know.
I will switch to depending on like the time of the month, I will switch to tea sometimes. Like I'll do an English breakfast tea because sometimes women certain times of the month I get more jittery and anxious, so I'll
Fair.
switch to tea, like
That's fair.
English breakfast tea. So that's always an option.
That's a solid pivot for you, Adam. I personally think that if you've never had coffee and you try black coffee, it is going to taste like ass.
No, here's the thing.
Yeah.
You're not going to like it.
I know what it tastes like. I've taken
How?
a sip of coffee before to be like,
That's-
oh,
no,
what's
but
this
there's-
taste like? But I've never drank a full cup of coffee before. That's my
Gotcha.
claim.
I'm
Well-
also a bit of a coffee snob. I was
Yeah.
barista for years, and I have like beans
Yeah,
that
hey,
were
yeah.
grown in Venezuela that I get at my like farmers market from my hometown. Like
I
they
love-
are specially made beans.
I love
Yeah,
the
I'm
smell
a bit
of
of a
coffee. I love the vibes of coffee houses. Like, it's my favorite.
Why don't you drink? Why have you never drank a cup of coffee? Is there a reason other than you just haven't?
There was a point in time where it switched from a real reason to now it's a point of pride. It's a fun fact about myself that I think is cool. But like for a long time, the first time I tasted it, I said it was disgusting and I just never tried it. And then for a long time, I have a tough time with caffeine because I'm already an incredibly energetic person and I have somewhat of a caffeine deficiency. So if I have too much of it, it's bad for me. And so I just decided at one point that I was going to be a tea person. But then it just became a point of pride. Like somebody was like, you should just do it. I'm like, but no, now it's kind of fun. So like there needs to be a big reason for me to do it for the first time.
You could always say like I didn't have my first cup of coffee until age blank. That
That's
could
true.
be almost a point
That's
of
fair.
pride.
I've got you with this, and this may not be for before the next episode to try and rank. So maybe you rank the tea. But when we see each other in December, which the listeners will already hear, they will be hearing this after.
That's true.
I'm going to bring what I do a pour over, which is the first time I ever had black coffee that I actually thought was good, with nothing like added to it to sweeten it. And I'll make it for myself. I'm going to demand that you take a sip.
Okay.
And if you like it and you think it is worth it, I would be honored to be your only ever cup of coffee.
I will also
You could
say
also do like a
go
half
ahead.
calf blend. You could go
That's
half
fair.
calf or decaf.
I
you
also
know?
like if I ever decided to be a coffee person, I would never add stuff to it because I wouldn't want to be like I feel like so many people get like really shackled by like having so much sugar and extra milk and stuff in it because they need that for it to taste the way they want. If I decided to be a coffee person, it's just going to be black coffee because I know that like actual black coffee is good for you if you have like a cup or two a day. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
100%.
and if you make it the right way and you're patient with how you make coffee, you can get some really good coffee without having to add anything at all.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we have a whole coffee bar now because we have 3 or 4 different types of coffee makers. We have like the French press. We have an Italian coffee maker, a dirty sock coffee maker, and a pour over.
Jeez.
And then we have like our
bro.
Nespresso. Yeah. We're a bit snobby over here.
Yeah, well, I'm starting to feel like
be
I need my second cup of coffee for the morning. By the way, listeners, we are recording this at night, but just pretend it's the morning. So I think that's a solid ending point for our conversation. The sound of breakfast made me hungry. The thought of coffee.
I
makes
am
me
hungry
thirsty.
for sure because I only had lunch today and I didn't so
But it's breakfast time. You gotta act like it's breakfast.
I ate lunch at
Yeah.
1 a.m. and
Yeah, lunch was at 1 a.m. But thank you, Kylie, so much for
Yes, thank
coming
you.
on the podcast. Thank you for talking everything story. Thank you for talking about your podcast. Before we go, is there anything that you want to plug? Anything you want to shout out? Anything you have coming up that's fun other than your screenwriting that you don't want to share?
Well, I mean, as Adam said, I did a pretty good job plugging throughout the episode. But, we take on a new horror movie every series. So come check us out and try a movie that you like first that's in our list. We've done a lot. We've done some of Chandler's favorites and Adam's favorites, like Scream and Silence of the Lambs. We try to play a little bit in every space. So there's probably something there for you. And just come and play in that space with us. We're not perfect, but we have a lot of fun with what we're doing.
Is there a place that you have this list, or is it just go to your podcast and have it all there?
It's on our podcast page. Every series is listed with, it'll be like 101, Deep Dive, Nightmare on Elm Street. And then we kind of do it by series. So each...
Got you.
Yeah, each series is a different film. Our YouTube actually has them organized by playlist by film.
Nice.
So if that's more your speed, you can watch me in my obnoxiously expressive face continue to be very expressive over there. And if you like werewolves or vampires, we just finished a couple of exciting Halloween specials that we've been doing for the last 2 years that focus on those creatures specifically, not a specific film, but we cover a whole bunch of movies.
That's awesome.
Within that realm. So, yeah, that's us. Survived this crit. My co-host Nick and I, we have a great time, and hopefully you'll come and join us.
Yeah, hopefully we may or may not come and join, so keep a lookout.
You guys, keep a lookout, because I think Chandler and Adam are going to be facing some of their fears pretty soon.
It would be pretty fun and or disappointing if by the time this episode is released, we did or did not do it. Then they could be like, well, they didn't do it, or they already did it. We listened to that first.
I think
either way,
based on how our episodes
are
coming out, you guys will come out after our, like, if you guys, when you are on our show, your episode will come out after this episode comes out.
Well, great. We're fine then.
Yeah,
so
you guys are good.
You guys have no clue.
There's no way that anything could sidetrack that plan.
Not at all. Because everything is predictable in the world of podcasting and production.
The stakes are so high. Such high stakes.
Thank you so much for being on with us
today,
Kylie. I really enjoyed our conversation. Again, thank you very much to Kylie for joining us on the episode today. If you haven't checked out Survive This Crit yet, you should. The way that they sort of put everything together is wildly impressive. I mean, it's very, very cool what they do.
It's also very fun. Don't ask me how I know that. But it's definitely a fun experience to be a part of.
Intuition.
Intuition tells me not only that it's a fun experience to be a part of, but that you guys should also look out soon.
Maybe.
If you like us.
But a big takeaway that I'm going to have from this episode is sort of the idea of bringing yourself into your art, and particularly with, tabletop RPGs. What Kylie and what they do with their podcast is obviously you're playing actual version of yourself in the scenario that they're playing out.
Yeah.
But even in character creations for other role-playing games, when you're playing not yourself, it's still a version of yourself that kind of exists for the most part. I mean, sometimes when you're like a really veteran player, you can make a character and like just make it totally not you, but like inevitably in a role-playing scenario, there's going to be character bleed. Part of you is going to bleed into that character, right? Like every character I play, no matter what type of person they are, there's still a little goofiness to them because that's just who I am and that's what I know, right? But I the idea of your artwork is sort of always a part of who you are, and it's showing people a part of you. I forget what somebody... there's a famous quote that said this, and I actually may have mentioned this on a previous episode. I can't remember at this point in time. But somebody talked about writing is basically cutting yourself opening and bleeding on the page. And so I like that imagery of opening yourself up in sometimes a scary way and sometimes a painful way. But in doing that, you are sharing this very beautiful personal part of yourself, not just in role-playing games, but obviously in role-playing games this happens a lot more often, but in storytelling in general, when you're sharing a part of your soul, really. And that's one of the reasons why I continue to come back to both role-playing games and all versions of storytelling.
Absolutely. How fitting to mention bleeding out on a page when talking about not only like D&D but also horror movies and horror films. And speaking of like the horror, I think my takeaway, something that horror films clearly like do well is raising stakes. And there's something I think fascinating. I mean, clearly there's stuff fascinating about stories and experiencing stories that have heightened stakes. Like it's more interesting to watch things that are like grander. It's not as fun to watch someone eat a bowl of cereal unless they have to eat a bowl of cereal in under 30 seconds. Otherwise, their feet get blown off or something random. I don't know. I made that up off the top of my head. That would probably be a really cool short film or a really bad short film. But this idea of raising the stakes that horror films do really well, you can see that done successfully in any storytelling form. Like that's kind of like the flow of a good story is like events happening, stakes get raised, and like why are you watching or reading or experiencing a story? Like what's the purpose of a character going through events if not like surviving through raised stakes?
I was trying to come up with a joke about like eating steak, but I can't in this moment because I just really liked that.
I was going to say raised stakes, not just the best way to defend yourself from a vampire.
Hey. I just read Interview with the Vampire for the first time, actually. I don't know if you've ever read
an actual interview with an actual vampire?
Yeah.
Or is that the title of the book?
No, it's the title of the book.
That's so much less cool.
Very popular book by Anne Rice. It came out like in the 70s, I think, 70s or 80s, but you see the influence of that on like vampire media culture 1,000%. Yeah, so make sure you check out Survive This Crit, of course. Very good podcast. Maybe check it out sometime in the new year. There might be, an interesting episode at some point.
Yeah, like it's weird. It's almost like you could think if there was
interesting.
any kind of cross promotional between podcasters, there may be a reciprocated cross promotion among podcasters. But I don't know. I'm not much of a podcaster myself, so you guys will just have to check it out.
I'm really bad at telling the future, so I couldn't say that for sure or not. But also in the meantime, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe on our podcast.
Share with your friends.
Yeah, please do. And again, hey, like I also want to point out, this is something that I wish I would have said in other episodes. It wasn't until this episode that I finally got my mic, so now my audio doesn't sound terrible compared to yours and our guests.
I wasn't going to say it. I wasn't going to say it. I might have thought it, but I wasn't going to say it.
The idea is that we get better over time, right? So we're hitting our stride. It's growth.
Development.
Like, you're going to be able to say, wow, guys, their podcast is like the best it's ever been in episode 100. Remember how bad it was in episode 1?
But to get there, just keep in mind, if our story is getting better over time, we need you guys to spread the word so we can have more viewers, so that those stakes can be raised, so that there is that pressure to get better, even more better.
And so that the stakes are raised so high that when you tag a very specific person, in fact named Brandon Sanderson,
he may just respond or come on the podcast. But yeah, tag him.
Please do.
Tag him.
Thanks for listening to the show, guys.
Yeah, I think it's time for lunch.